Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. Before we get into today's topic, I want to do with housekeeping, because I like to keep my house nice and clean, don't you know? So, 3 things, oh God, I just made myself laugh there. 3 things you can do for me at the beginning of this episode is make sure that you follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on anything that I'm doing, watching and reading and all of that jazz. Number 2, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And finally, if you listen to this on Spotify on your mobile phone, don't forget to leave a star rating between 1 to 5 stars. So if you can do all those 3 things for me right at the beginning of the episode, I will be eternally grateful. So today, finally, we are here. It has taken a long time. It has been a long time in the making, and finally, we are here. We're going to be talking about Mass Effect Deception, the final Mass Effect novel. And then when this is done, we can then lead straight in to Mass Effect 3 at the end of the month. Finally, hallelujah, we are here. Bit of an update before we get into it. So make sure, if you haven't already, to go back and listen to my review of Mass Effect 2. That should be up by the time this is out. So it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on all platforms, it'll be on YouTube. If you haven't listened to that, go and check it out. Please do, because I put a lot of time and effort into that one, and Mass Effect 2 is my favourite of all the Mass Effects. So I want that one to really do well and succeed. Also, check out my last book review, the book that comes before this one, Mass Effect Retribution. That is out now also. So again, that's on all platforms. Check that one out, please. And yeah, what I wanted to mention, usually when I do any sort of book review that I tie in with a TV show or game or whatever, usually I haven't finished the game or the TV show yet. I tend to do it, as I'm going along. Because how long it took me to get through Retribution and then having to record that, as well as having to record stuff for my Mass Effect 2 review, that by the time that I'd started Mass Effect 3, I was still reading Retribution. So as I was going through that, I basically blitzed through Mass Effect 3, and I've now finished it. And I've not only finished the game, I've also finished the review. So I'm a bit ahead of myself now, to be honest. Obviously, it's no real spoilers because I've played Mass Effect 3. I know what happens in it, and I know what happens anyway, so it's not really a big spoiler. But yeah, it's a little bit unconventional for me because I don't tend to do it this way. So it's a bit odd being so far ahead of myself. But, sometimes this happens when you're doing podcasting. So what can you do? So I'm going to read the synopsis of the book for you now. There we are. So, Cerberus assassin Kai Leng journeys to the ancient city of Tundur of the Batarian homeworld on Kashak. I can never pronounce it right. Kashak, I think it is. To retrieve an item in an auction of rare goods and artifacts. The item in question is the design of a DNA-specific bioweapon tailored to target the elusive man, the leader of Cerberus, and which could potentially affect thousands of people distantly related to him. Leng snatches the design and makes his escape. On the Citadel, David Anderson, Kylie Sanders, and Nick Donoghue prepare to speak to the Citadel Council about Paul Grayson's attack on the Grissom Academy. At the Citadel Tower, Anderson and Sanders inform the Council of the Reaper's involvement, but the councillors are unconvinced and prefer to argue that Grayson was acting on behalf of Cerberus. Even after they are shown Grayson's Reaper mutilated body, Anderson and Sanders are told to continue their investigation. After the presentation, they find that Nick has disappeared. They go to the Cube, a gym for biotics, to see if he has gone there early, but no luck. A Volus attendant at the Cube directs them to Oscar Lem and Osiris Salus, a Solarian and a Taurian that Nick has been seen with on earlier visits. Lem and Solus address turns out to be fake, and Anderson and Sanders come to a conclusion that Nick is missing. So that is kind of a quick sort of synopsis of the plot and what's going on in the story. So my sort of first impression so far, so I've almost finished it. So by the time I was getting around to doing the review for Mass Effect 3. I'd finished Retribution. I'd started this, and because I'm reading it off Kindle, but there's a really cool feature on Kindle that I love. It's text to speech, so you can basically have a Kindle read the book to you. It's not fantastic. It's not AI or anything like that. It's simply just it's a robotic voice reading you the pages, and like some words it can do really good, and then there are some words that you can tell that the sort of software struggles with, especially when you're reading a sci-fi novel and they can't properly pronounce Omnital or Batarian, which is funny. But so I've managed to blitz through it quite quickly while I'm finishing off the review for that, and while I was playing other games as well in my free time after I'd finished Mass Effect 3. So I'm almost done. I'm about 71 to about 75% way through, and then I realized I was like, crap, I haven't even done the introduction yet, so I had to stop listening. I thought I'd get around to doing the introduction. But first impressions of the book, like I said, I'm a bit further than I usually am. Usually at this point I've probably read an hour, so to kind of give you my first impressions. Now almost done. I'm gonna have to hold myself back a bit, but I'm not enjoying it. I'm not going to say as to why, because again I'm going to leave that for the review and overall conclusion. But I'm not enjoying it. I would have happily, of the books, ended at Retribution. Drew Karpyshyn did a fantastic job with the trilogy, with the series. It should have ended with him when he left and he stopped writing stories for BioWare. He's recently come back. I think he's heading, I think it's Dragon Age or the new Mass Effect, I'm not sure. But he's now come back, but at the time he had left. So they needed to get a new writer on. And the writer they got in for this one was William C. Diaz. If you've read one of the Halo novels, he wrote The Flood, which is a sort of a retelling of the events of the first Halo game, but from the full perspective of Master Chief. It's a very, very fascinating book. I highly recommend it. You get to see like generally how terrified the Chief is of the Flood, and you get loads of little bits of nuggets and information as well. Like generally, it's a well written and fantastic novel, and it's one of the better Halo novels. And it's a bit of a shame that this writer comes in and he wrote such a fantastic novel, and then here, I don't know what happened. I really don't. Again, I'm being intentionally vague. I'll be more sort of open and forwards when we get to the actual review itself. But yeah, I'm not really enjoying it, and it's a bit of a sour note, and it's a real shame because, like I said, what Drew Karpyshyn was able to do with the first 3 books of not only did he tell a compelling story, but he had compelling and interesting characters. He expanded the world even wider, and even those books were even tied in with the game. You know, even in like the third game, I never mentioned it in my review of the third game, sadly. But even in the third game, they mentioned Paul Grayson, or they just mentioned Grayson or Paul Grayson. Like they mentioned the experiments that happened to him. No one that I've met in this story, apart from Callie, obviously, because you do meet her in Mass Effect 3 in Grissom Academy, and obviously you meet Captain Anderson anyway. But nowhere in Mass Effect 3 do they mention anything or anybody or any events that happened in this book. Again, maybe it's a factor because this book came out after the game was finished. I don't know. I'm not sure. It just seems strange, the fact of you have the OG books that are really, really good and everybody loves. They get loads of mentions and Easter eggs and things like that hidden in the games, and there's nothing in here. And I was really hoping that the reason for that was like something big happens, but I don't know. I was just hoping for something huge, and you don't get it. I hate to say it just feels a bit of a cash grab by the author. And again, I really do hate to say it because I don't like being negative, but I feel like I'm going to be really negative with this book, but I'll save that for the end as well. One thing about this book that I've mentioned a couple of my Mass Effect reviews, this book is notoriously known for having tons of continuity errors. I've already noticed quite a few, and I've noted them down, as well as there is a list on Reddit if you want to check them out. The list is absolutely huge. But there's a lot of continuity errors, then I will add them in this. They was meant to fix them. They had promised that, like BioWare, like when this book came out, a lot of fans were upset, and for good reason. And basically what they decided to do was like, look, we'll tell BioWare, and BioWare said, yeah, well, in the next editions, we'll fix it. Nowhere can I find anywhere that they've actually said they fixed it or not. Still can't find them. So as far as I'm aware, those errors are still in there. From the errors that I've found, I would say yes, they are, which kind of puts even deeper sour note because it feels more of a cash grab. And again, I hate saying it, but the guy who did Flood was such a fantastic, so good and so well written. Wrote this one, and it just, yeah. But we'll get there when we get to the review. Like I said, I'm going to save it till I've finished. Like as I always do with anything that I read or anything that I watch or play, I tend to go in glass empty. Granted, I've already halfway through, so half my glass is mostly full. But I'm going to save all opinions because it could save it. In these last few chapters, it could completely save it and be like, yeah, the beginning was terrible, the middle was a bit, but the end is better, redeems it. I don't know because I haven't got there yet. So I'm going to cast all sort of opinions, keep them to myself and cast them away for a minute. And then when we get to the review, I'll unleash and then I'll give you the full rundown. But yeah, so that is the introduction. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm going to finish it now. It shouldn't take me too long to finish it. More than likely, I'll probably get my reviews recorded either today or tomorrow. We will see. But you don't have to wait because you'll get my thoughts and feelings right about now. Right, so I'm just going to say this right off the top because I don't want anybody to waste their time. Don't read this book. It's complete dog doo-doo. It's trash. It's terrible. It's probably one of the worst things I have read in a very, very long time. To be honest, it disgusts the name of Mass Effect. It doesn't deserve to be called Mass Effect or to be involved in any capacity to Mass Effect. Really, like it's just terrible. So I just want to warn people at the very, very beginning of this review: do not bother with this book. Don't read it. Don't buy it. Don't borrow it. If you see it in the street, ignore it. And if you own a copy of it, burn it. Nobody else should read this book ever. It's terrible. Like it's probably one. It's so bad. It's just so bad. It's really, really terrible. And that moves on quickly to sort of first impressions. I hate it. I really did. I'm going to be honest. Well, I'll be honest through this whole thing. There's potentiality that I might swear. I usually try to keep quite clean, but there's potentiality I might swear. And I have tried my best to, I've read this morning, finished it, and I left myself a couple of hours to think about it and to kind of calm down because I knew if I did it straight away, it'd be a lot of effing and blinded. Generally, with this book, if I wasn't doing it for the podcast, I would be incredibly disappointed. Disappointed in myself for wasting my money, disappointed in myself that I read it, and just disappointed in general. Granted, yes, I did this for the podcast, and so it was some worth it because, again, content and all that jazz. But if it wasn't for that, I generally probably would have finished this book very early. I would have DNF'd it. I would have did not finish and moved on very quickly. It is so bad. There are so many things wrong with it. There are so many errors. There are so many problems. Like for example, you have, and I'm just going to jump straight into it. So this whole book makes no sense. Okay. And the biggest sort of point for that I can think of is at the very, very beginning, right? So the beginning makes no sense. There is no way a human would be allowed anywhere near the Batarian homeworld. Not just humans, but any race. So for anybody who isn't in the know of Mass Effect, the Batarians went into self-isolation. What that means is the fact of anybody who is a Batarian has to stay in the Batarian system. They're not allowed to leave. A majority of them do. They go to the terminal systems. They become slavers and mercenaries. But majority of the Batarian people have to stay in the Batarian system. And that is the same for anybody. So if they stay in their system, nobody's allowed to enter their system. Not human, Asari, Turian, Krogan, Hanar, Volus, X, Y, and Z. Nobody's allowed in and nobody's allowed out. So there is no way that Kai Lang, a Cerberus operative and a human, would be allowed to go into the system undetected, let alone land on Kashyyyk, the Batarian homeworld, and be able to stroll around freely, willy-nilly, like there's no problem, like there was never any beef or problems between humans and Batarians in the first place. And then not just that, being able to walk freely, then go to an auction that not only has other humans in, but has Taurians, Solarians, Asari, and a Volus auctioneer on board. There's no way not any of this would happen. That doesn't make no sense. Then you have characters that are doing things that make no sense. So like Kai Lang, he eats tons of cereal in this book for no apparent reason. Like there's this one moment, and it makes me laugh because it's incredibly stupid. And if it wasn't for the fact that this book was linked to Mass Effect and it was generally just a science fiction book, then I would find it hilarious because it is that stupid. But because it is attached to something that I'm so passionate about, that I love so much, it just makes me angry, and it confuses me as to why this was published, and whoever read it was like, yeah, this is fine. So there's this moment where you have Kai Lang, right? Super spy, best bloke ever, you know, a big douche. We hate him, Mass Effect 3, all that jazz, right? He's on, I can't remember, I think he's on the Omega or the Citadel. Anyway, he breaks into Anderson's apartment. He gets in there, and again, he starts doing spy stuff. He starts leaving bugs and wiretaps and things like that. You know, you think, okay, he's come in, he's left all these things. Time to vamoose, go back to his hideout and lie in wait for Anderson and Carly to come back and to listen to what they're talking about. No. This motherfucker decides to go into Anderson's kitchen, make himself a bowl of cereal, and then just sits there and proceeds to grumble about how bad his life is and how much he's messed up and all this jazz while he sits there and eats cereal in Anderson's apartment. Many things like this make no sense. Kai Lang isn't Kai Lang in this book. He's not the Kai Lang that's in Mass Effect 3. He's not the Kai Lang that's in Ascension or Retribution. He's not the same character, and it's the same for Jillian. For somehow Jillian is no longer autistic, so they just get rid of that. Like the best thing that I love so much, the autistic and neurodivergent representation in Ascension. What I love the most, and you know, me being autistic as well, and having that representation was absolutely incredible and wonderful. And the biggest praise I can give it in the last book is now wiped clean. She's no longer autistic. She's been cured of it, done. Forget about all that. And she's not the same character at all. The way she acts, the way she speaks, the things that she does in this book make no sense. I'm going to spoil it, by the way, because I don't want anybody to read this. I don't want anybody to waste their time reading this book. If you want to, there is if you search Mass Effect Deception lore errors, if you go to the first post, which I think is from Reddit, there is an Imager link. If you click on that, it will give you a frame for frame kind of what happens chapter by chapter of this book, and it's done in a very funny, silly sort of way. So if you want to understand a lot more about the story, do it that way, because you have a lot more time, because this book is just, it's hilariously bad and funny and stupid, but also very, very annoying. So Jillian makes no sense. You've got this character called Nick, who again, he makes no sense either, because like Nick in the last book, so in Retribution, at the end of the book, Nick basically gets swindled by Kai Lang. He doesn't know that Kai Lang is a Cerberus operative, and he just thinks, Kai Lang, he's a good guy, I'm trying to help him. In the end, he realized that Kai Lang's a bad bloke, and Kai Lang gets shot in the legs. Oh, mind you, sidetracked. Kai Lang is shot in the legs in the last one. Captain Anderson shoots the crap out of his legs, busts his legs up, right? He's now got a cane in this one, right? But somehow he's still able to run and do fly kicks and knock people out with his legs, even though he has to use a cane. And he moans majority of the book that, oh, my legs, my poor legs. But he's running around, climbing up buildings, doing flying kicks and stuff. I'm like, that makes no sense. That's not how shut up legs work, you know? So I just wanted to moan about that. Again, another thing that makes no sense. Anyway, so yeah, Nick, he saw Kai Lang get shot in the legs, blah, blah, blah. He realizes Kai Lang's a bad bloke. And then in this book, you have Nick, and at the very beginning, Captain Anderson and Callie take Nick to go see the council to kind of to talk about what happened with Paul Grayson. And the reason they took Nick was because Nick was one of the last people to see Grayson before he was killed. and they want to use him as evidence. They go to Citadel. They decide, oh, we know what, Nick, we'll leave you just in case. So you stay here. We'll have our meeting and we'll meet back, and then we'll go to the cube, where it's apparently a biotics gym that I've never heard of before, but it's fine. Okay. So they go off, and then for some unknown reason, they come back. Nick leaves no message. Like, literally, he's meant to have a crush on Callie. He's meant to have he's meant to have infatuation with her. He's meant to fancy her, but he leaves Carly. He doesn't leave a note for Carly. He doesn't tell anybody where he's going or what he's doing. He just decides that, oh, for some unknown reason, I'm just going to run off with this. Like, basically, I'm going to run off and join the mafia. Not technically the mafia. He runs off and he joins this underground biotic sort of gang. And then if he finds himself on Omega, then he decides it should be a clever idea to rob Arya to Loke. Absolute genius move. And again, it makes no sense for his character why he would do that. And this whole story actually takes place majority on Omega. I never thought I'd ever say this, but I couldn't hate Omega more. Genuinely, Omega is one of my favorite places in Mass Effect 2. I really, really enjoyed the Omega DLC from Mass Effect 3. I loved the Omega from the last two books. It's one of my favorite places in the Mass Effect universe. This book made me hate it because it makes Omega seem so boring and so shit and crap. And I'm sitting there like, how? I've been to this place. I've experienced it with my own hands and seen it. How can you make me really hate somewhere that I love? This makes no sense. And that's the thing about it. So none of this book makes sense. None of it does. There are so many errors. There are so many problems with the lore. And it's a nightmare, honestly, because the last three books, so you've got Revelation, Ascension, Retribution. The last three books are absolutely incredible. As a trilogy on their own, they are fantastic. They're up there with as good as the mainline game series. In my opinion, they are that good. Drew Carpenter, what he was able to do with these characters and expand the world and also bring in new readers and new fans, but also never to hold your hand, but also always make sure that you knew where you were going, that you never got lost, that you always knew where you was, what you were doing. The story made sense. The characters were interesting. Everything was just perfect. And with each novel, the world and these characters just evolved and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, as I mentioned in the introduction, he moved on. He decided to do something else. If I was in BioWare at this stage, I probably would have said, all right, our lead writer's gone. Let's finish it. Like, that's done. Like those books on their own, those three books are perfect. And where the last book ends, you don't need any more because the third game does enough work. And I mentioned this in my Mass Effect 3 review, which isn't out yet as of recording. Well, as of recording this, it isn't out yet, but I've already recorded it. But one thing that I mentioned in that review is the fact of they mention Paul Grayson. They mention his name and his involvement and his help with not his help, so his involuntary help in making the indoctrinated soldiers and Cerberus people. It's already there, laid out. So it could have ended with that last book. And then anybody who read it would play Mass Effect 3 and be like, oh, I know who Paul Grayson is. I know his involvement. I know how it all works. You didn't need a fourth book with Gillian. As far as I was concerned and happy with, the majority of the fan base, she was off in deep space with the Quarians. Fine. That is okay. Her character was incredible for that one book. I didn't need to know what she was doing at 18 years old with the Quarians. Didn't really need to know this. Also with the Quarians, for some of the reasons, they've just decided we're not going to have scrubbers. So the big thing about the Quarians, and trust me, I know this because I love the Quarians, right? I've proved it many times. If anybody, and this is including Quarians themselves, if anybody wants to go onto a Quarian ship or go onto the migrant fleet, everybody has to be decontaminated. Their ships get cleaned. They have to kind of stay in you have to go into quarantine for a while to make sure that you are clear. And then once the clears have been checked, you can kind of disembark your ship and then you can go on and go around. Right? This is a standard thing, standard procedure. This is a thing that Quarians do. Right? but they've just decided they're not doing that now. That they've just completely got rid of that in this book. This is not a thing that they do. Also, for some reason, the Quarians aren't wearing their suits. They're wearing bits of fabric and metal straps and fasteners. Like, there are many times I'm sitting there going, it doesn't work that way. That's just not how the Quarians are. That's not how they look. And it kills me. It really does, because Diaz, the writer of this book, as I've mentioned, right, and I will still say this, to be honest, his Halo novel is one of the best. It is absolutely incredible, right? It's an incredibly well done and well written novel. It like I said, it retells the events of Mass Effect. I mean, not Mass Effect. Sorry, Halo Combat Evolved through the eyes of Master Chief, and you get a full-on experience of Master Chief and the Marines and their first experience on the Halo Ring and their first experience with the Flood. And it even gives you extra details how the Chief is incredibly terrified of the Flood, things that you wouldn't get really if you just played the game. Right, it was a fantastic novel, but he really phoned it in here. I don't know what happened. I don't know if BioWare just was like, I tell you what, just write a Mass Effect book, and we'll give you a few things here and there, but that's about it. I don't know. I really don't know what happened. What got lost here? Was it the author? Was it the editing? Was it BioWare not caring? Was it EA not caring? Like, was it the publisher? Like, who fluffed up here? Who got to a point that allowed this? Like, who didn't reread it and go, oh, well, actually, Will, that does make sense. Let's change this. Let's fix this. That Batarians are not like that. Quarians are not like that. That's not how you kill a Krogan. Krogans can't be killed this way, because Krogans can't be stabbed in the back of the neck because they've got a giant shield on the back of their neck which stops them from basically they've got redundancies and things like that, and like you can't stab them in the back of the neck because that's anatomically not where Krogan's spines and things are, and blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff. Like, did nobody just sit there and go, let's fix this? Or did they just go, oh well, it's William C. Diaz, he's wrote Halo, he's wrote other novels, so we have to trust him, and then just released it onto the world, onto an unsuspecting fan base. And yeah, it's a real bummer. I've wrote some notes myself of errors. I've mentioned a few of them here, and I've sidetracked and mentioned other ones that have just come to mind. But there is a document that I'm going to read off, right? And I'm going to read most of them. Some of them I'm going to go into a bit more detail. Some of them I'm just going to mention them and move on, because I have to talk about the errors in this book, because there's so many, and it's just funny, but also it's incredibly annoying. So first of all, again, some of them are really serious, some of them are not, but in terms of lore, it just doesn't work, right? It's a complete error. So the Citadel is described as being star-shaped. While the Citadel does have 5 arms arranged around a ring, even when it's fully opened, the arms are not in the same plane as the central ring. Rather, they are oriented straight forwards. There is a Batarian embassy on the Citadel. No, there isn't. There was at one stage, but it was closed down after the Alliance and after the Council sided with the Alliance. Kai Lang versus Chorus's Den. No, he can't. No, he didn't. Because Korra's Den was destroyed and closed down after Sovereign's attack. The Citadel surrounded by stars. No, it's not. It's in a nebula. It's surrounded by one star, Widow, and all the rest are just little baby sort of sprinklets in around the area. Kai Lang kills a Krogan by slicing into the back of its neck and severing the spine. Yeah, can't do that because Krogan biology does not work that way. 1, there is a large hump that makes access to the rear of the neck difficult. 2, most blades, save for a molecular blade, cannot penetrate the thick hide covering the rear of the neck. And 3, even if the spine was severed, the Krogan still would not die, as Krogan are uniquely equipped with organ redundancy. Instead of an analog to the human nervous system, they have a second circuitry system with electricity conductive fluid. So that just proves that there. Deception claims that the Sari found the Citadel first and subsequently learned to use Mass Effect technology. No, they didn't, because there's no way they could find the Citadel without using Mass Effect technology. Sari are said to be asexual. No, they're not. They are a monogender race. They're an all-female species. Asari council members say, "My God," they have no form of God at all. If anything, they would say by the goddess. They believe that. Again, this is me being hardcore Mass Effect nerd. They believe that all species, all races in the Milky Way galaxy and the universe are all molecular, and that it's a very spiritual belief, and that they have a god, they have a faith in the goddess Athane. So the correct explanation would be by the goddess, not my god. Kai Lang visits an auction house on the Batarian homeworld. There's no way he could do that because of the self-imposed exile. No way any human or any race would ever get onto the homeworld of Kashan without being put into prison. So that doesn't make no sense. Batarian pirates slave raid on the Taurian homeworld of Palaven. That is incredibly... it's not impossible, but it is impossible because of, like the Taurians, they're militaristic. You know, at the age of 15, Taurians serve for 15 years in the military. Everybody serves in the military in the Taurian homeworld. So everybody knows how to fight. So there is no way one Batarian ship, slave ship, could go on to Palaven and start stealing people. It would start a war. It wouldn't end well. There's no way they could get in, get out with people. They'd get in and die, even if they managed to get that far. So that makes no sense. The public is allowed into Citadel Council chamber. No, they're not. Nobody is allowed to go in there unless you've been invited or you're a council member. Gillian visits the afterlife. Afterlife is a very popular bar in Omega, and people wait hours to get in. For example, Retribution, Mass Effect 2, that sort of thing. In Deception, Gillian enters immediately without any trouble from the bouncers. Quarian clothing, again, this is another one that bothered me. Quarians wear environmentally sealed suits to protect their weakened immune system. They do not wear a motley collection of clothing held together by a variety of straps and metal fasteners. Batarian slave ships released to Gillian and company by Quarians. This wouldn't happen. No matter how much Gillian has been with the Quarians and how much she's seen as a member of the migrant fleet now that she's served with them, there is no way they would give her a ship, especially not one that is quite advanced as a Batarian slave ship. They would keep it, they would use it, and it would go back to the migrant fleet. So there is no way that they would give her a full ship all to herself. It just wouldn't happen. Then you've got beryllium is no longer toxic. At one point, Gillian finds and carries with her slugs of beryllium with no visible repercussions. This might be reasonable so long as beryllium stays in slug form. If, however, she's ever exposed to it in powdered form, e.g. if it is milled, filed, scraped, scratched, or exploded, it could be extremely toxic. Also worth noting is that even in solid form, beryllium is a skin irritant to many people. In addition, the 6-kilo belt that Gillian was carrying would take up to 3.24 liters, which is a ridiculous size. Or not liters, pounds, sorry. But still, it's a ridiculous size, doesn't make sense. Beryllium is currency. I don't know when that started, but I've never heard in Mass Effect at all that beryllium was a currency. It was always been credits. Quarian ships visit Omega on a regular basis and maintain a warehouse. This is not true. People do go to Omega, but there is no way the migrant fleet goes there, especially not Quarian ships on the regular. This is not something that happens. There's no to the Quarian embassy. The Asari Council objects to a Quarian embassy because it implies the existence of a cohesive government, despite the fact that the Quarians have a very well-structured government and have had one for centuries. Oh God, there's loads. For example, Kai Lang is said to have been in the Alliance Military Corps. While he was an Alliance Marine, there is no Alliance Marine Corps. It is not a separate service branch. Kai Lang was an N6 rated soldier in the Alliance. Lang was actually designated as N7 in the Systems Alliance military, while N describes a soldier belonging to Special Forces. 7 is the highest level of proficiency that a soldier can obtain. Anderson, thinking that the Citadel trap had been sprung so successfully, they were still repairing damages. The premise of the first game is that Shepard and his squad prevented that particular Reaper plan from succeeding. The damage to the Citadel mostly resulted from Sovereign's destruction. A hollow of Grayson being implanted depicts large cables attacking him and burrowing into his body and him pleading for death. In retribution, he was implanted surgically with repeat nanotech while gradually constructed cabling over a long period of time and was unable to speak at all during the procedure, much less able to beg for mercy. Additionally, he never spoke to his Cerberus captors after the implantations was complete. Two Volus are described as wearing masks that don't completely cover their face. This is not true. Volus wear a complete suit because of the high pressure of their world. Anderson is repeatedly said to be employed by the council. No, he isn't. He quit in retribution under rather dramatic circumstances. That is why when we get to Mass Effect 3, he's no longer Councilman Anderson, it's Councilman Udina. Gillian is supposedly only allowed to participate in defending the Udina because she's 18 and thus not a minor. In Mass Effect 2, Hans Godal recalls being a trainee of a gunship with Raoul Zahol while still underage and participating in combat on that ship during a Batarian raid. He and Raoul were subsequently sent off on a pilgrimage early as a result of their actions. In addition, Quarians do not demean a majority by one's age, but rather by competition of the pilgrimage. And there is loads. The Quarians transfer the rescued slaves over to the Adena without any sort of decontamination process. Yeah, so they just take the slaves, don't clean them, don't decontaminate them, just put them on the ship. Like they don't do that no more, apparently. The Citadel is said to have a red ward with a blue ward. This has never been mentioned and doesn't fit into the established naming scheme for the wards. For example, Anderson and Carly Sanders are said to have joined forces to battle the Spectre named Seren. They did not. At no point did either fight against Seren. Anderson was in fact working with him for a good portion of Revelation. The closest Eva got to battling him was Anderson attempted to grab him once during an argument over Seren's methods. It didn't work. And there were loads. Like there's ones for the timeline as well. So Hendel knows Anderson and knows not only that Anderson and Carly are now together, but also where they live on Citadel. Handel had never met Anderson before this book, and Carly and Anderson only reunited in Retribution years after Hendel had left with the Idena. Retribution also states that Carly has not been in contact with either of him or Gillian since the end of Ascension. Gillian and Nick are 18 years old in Deception. They were both 12 going on 13 in Ascension, set a bit less than 3 years prior to Deception. In Retribution, which takes place mere months prior to the events of Deception, Nick was just 15. Arya learns that Cerberus killed her daughter, but continues working for them in Invasion. Again, makes no sense. Ugo is in charge of the defense against the Batarian slaves. There's also a timeline issue. So during the 3 years since Ascension, both Nick and Gillian have aged 6 years. In addition, the attack on the Citadel is said to have taken place 2 years earlier, despite it actually taking place 3 years earlier, among other issues. Gillian receives a pendant containing data from Cerberus from her father before leaving Grissom Academy. This is a double-edged error. Gillian left in the company of Paul Grayson in Ascension. Deception also makes it so Grayson sent this gift right before Cerberus captured him, which happened over 2 years earlier. Gillian left the Academy. In other words, the pendant must also be capable of time travel. It makes no sense. And there is loads, like in forms of technology, Quarians referred to as gas suckers. Yeah, no, their masks only look like gas masks. Their actual function is a filtration of air. The Tacticus drive core of a Batarian ship, though the Tacticus drive is referred to as standard, it was actually a highly secret experimental drive core first used on the SSV Normandy. It's doubtful that a dated Batarian ship would have one. Additionally, such a core is by itself equivalent to the cost of an entire cruiser class ship. So there's no way the Batarians would have the technology, let alone have it on an old Batarian ship. It wouldn't make any sense. And again, this whole thing doesn't make sense. Bartics are suddenly classified by their power level. That's never been a thing. Like they say L2 or L3, but that's not a level. That's just what implant you have. You know, at the end of the day, there are canonical references to people being level 1, level 2, and level 3 Bartics. 3 supposedly being the strongest. There is no such classification scheme, and it appears to result from confusing the implant designations L2 and L3 with an individual's esoteric potential. This error is compounded by the fact that in Mass Effect 1, it is mentioned that those with L2s can sometimes get better results than those with the newer L3 systems, as L2s allow the bionic to spike higher. Right, hand weapons that fire at realistic speeds, no kinetic barriers. Jillian gets new biotic implants in a few hours. Operation in a non-medical facility, yeah, that couldn't happen. Bionic terminology, Asari air kisses. Jillian sensing that a pair of Asari strangers were capable biotics. Anderson claims Omega has no public newscasts. Mass Effect 2 begs to differ. Waiting for the slavers. C-set checkpoints. Jillian's autism is never mentioned. For example, the closest the book gets to noting that she was in an unstable 12-year-old and a passing reference to her having a temper. This is not presented as a disability, but rather a adolescent phase she was largely gotten over. Quarian names, friendships of Jillian and Nick. Like, generally, I could go on and on and on. There is so many things wrong with this book, and this document that I'm reading just goes on. I've just read the first few ones, and I know it seemed like I read loads. That was just the iceberg. There are tons more. None of this book makes sense, and it just hurts my head. Like, for example, Kai Lang fails multiple times in this story, and it's been established that if you keep failing, like the Cerberus, like the elusive man only accepts the best. If you keep failing, he's going to let you go either by killing you, well, more than likely just killing you, because you can't get out easily in Cerberus. It's not that easy to leave. Once you're in, you're in. But how many times Kai Lang fails in this book? And still, at the very end, the elusive man is like, yeah, it's fine, it's Kai Lang, I'll take him back and we'll get some guys to fix your legs for you and all this jazz. I'm like, it's oh, you know, none of it makes sense to any of the characters, the story, and it just hurts because this series in books did such a fantastic, perfect job of telling a good story, of having interesting characters and interesting twists and turns and events and basically everything that you want from a novel. That, as I've mentioned it many times, any novel that is based on a TV show, game, movie, whatever, what that novel should do, it should bolster what's already there. But the main media should never have to rely on the extended media. These novels never did or never have. You could play Mass Effect and never read the books and enjoy it for what it is. That's what I did when I first played Mass Effect. I wasn't really into reading when I first played Mass Effect. And I rediscovered these books later on in life and absolutely loved and adored them. To be honest, they were that good that generally you could take the Mass Effect title off and then just call them something else, and they would be fantastic science fiction novels on their own. But as Mass Effect novels, they work perfectly because they expand the world and like they're extra bits and nuggets, information and details, and the games reference the books. Nowhere in Mass Effect 3 is any of the events in this book mentioned. No characters are really mentioned. Obviously, you meet Jillian and you meet Captain Anderson, obviously. But what I'm on about, I'm on about like Nick, Jillian. Aria never mentions anything to do with the fact of her daughter being killed by Cerberus, but she still decides to work with Cerberus, even though she finds out that Cerberus killed her daughter. She still in Retribution, she is distraught. She is upset. She tried to keep it all a secret, and then her daughter died, and she blames Paul for that. And she even works with Cerberus because Cerberus lies to her and says, "Oh, it was Paul who did it. Help us find Paul." But when she finds out in this book that Cerberus are the ones that are actually involved in killing her daughter, she still works with them. It makes this whole book just doesn't make any sense. And I'll be honest with you, I'm running out of steam. I really am. Because I'm just tired. But honestly, my overall thoughts is don't waste your time. Don't do it. Please. I don't know how to say it more. This is one of the worst video game novels I've ever read. Also, more than likely, very highly, up until this point anyway, the worst book I've read this year. And it stings more because it's in the same universe that I love, that I've spent hours and days in. And it's just bad. It's just terrible. So please don't. My overall thoughts is don't bother with it. Spend your money on something else. It's shit. It is. It's terrible. It's not worth anybody's attention. I've already given it too much attention already. This book should be forgotten, generally. And I made a joke earlier, but I'm being serious. Of like, if you find this book anywhere, ignore it, burn it, dodge it in the street. You know what I mean? Like, just don't pay attention to this book at all because it's a stain on the Mass Effect record, and it's one of those that I feel like we all should just want to forgive and forget. So yeah, so that was my thoughts and feelings on Mass Effect Deception. I'll be honest, I had high hopes. I wanted to like it. I wanted to come in there and just hope, have my fingers crossed that BioWare realized the mistakes they made and fixed them. But it seems like they haven't. They haven't fixed them at all. But I'll be honest with you, I generally think that even if BioWare fixed all of the continuity errors, all the lore errors, all the timeline errors, if they fix every single error, even despite that, I still think this book would be bad because nothing happens. There's nothing. There's no interest in it at all. There's no sort of expansion to anything. There is no new lore or anything like that. Like generally, it is just Gillian finds out that like Nick decides to join a sort of noobotic gang cult. Gillian finds out that Cerberus kills her father, so Gillian makes her way to Omega to look for to help somebody, to find somebody to help her to get the elusive man. Runs in Nick. She ends up working with this group to blackmail the elusive man. They capture Kai Lang, and that's basically it, really. And at the very end, of the book, then it's a fact. Then you have like Captain Anderson and Carly are like to the council. Yeah, Cerberus are building soldiers, building an army out of Reaper technology. And that Paul Grayson was just the beginning. And then for the council to do what they always do with Mass Effect. Oh, well, we don't believe you. Makes no sense. There's no proof, blah, blah, blah. And then that's it. That's it. That's all you get. You get a little bit at the beginning when you have Captain Anderson and Carly first meet the council. And then you get a little bit at the end when they meet the council again. Everything in between and beforehand makes no sense. And like it's just come to me. I know I'm wrapping up, but it's just come to me. So at the beginning of this book, so the reason why Kai Lang is on the Batarian homeworld, let's forget about that. The reason he's out at the auction is because somehow, again, it's never explained and it's never brought up again. You'd think if this was meant to be the prologue, it'd be brought up again. It never is. It's not even that important. I think generally it was just trying to have it was just there for their sake. You know, there's no real reason to it. But the reason Kai Lang is there is because somehow somebody has gotten this technology which can track the elusive man and find out who the elusive man is. It's like a DNA tracker of like whoever has it can track the elusive man, track down the elusive man's family, and find out the elusive man's identity. Now that in itself, even my explanation does sound kind of interesting. And if they stuck with that and they stuck with the book with that story, it might have been interesting. But it isn't, because it's never brought up again. It makes no sense that the Batarians would sell that as well. If the Batarians had that type of technology, there is no way they would sell that in an auction. They would use that for themselves to hunt down the elusive man. There is no way the Batarians, who hate humans, hate us, would go after the biggest hated and monstrous human there is, elusive man and Cerberus. There is no way they would sell it for credits. They would use it themselves. Makes no sense. It's not even a good introduction because it makes utter sense. Makes no utter sense. It's bullshit. Yeah, but I can feel my temper rising. I don't like this is probably the most negative I've ever been on a review, and I'm really negative because I love it so much. I love Mass Effect so much, and it kills me that this is part of it. It does not belong in this series at all, and I hate it. I really do. It's terrible. So yeah, don't bother with this. Don't read it. Please don't. Heed my words. Read something else. Play something else. Pretend like this never happened, because I'm definitely going to. I'm going to try and scrub my brain as best as I can, because I don't want to remember anything more of this book. So I want to quickly move on to the end of like, thank you very much for listening. Generally, listening to my TED talk, listening to my rant. If you like this or enjoyed it, or you want to hear me talk about more about Mass Effect in a lot more positive light, then by all means, please check out all my other Mass Effect reviews, book reviews, my reviews of the first 2 games. Next week, you'll be getting my full review on Mass Effect 3. That is a lot more positive and a lot less negative than this one. It's a shame I have to kind of lead into a fantastic episode like that with a negative review. But that's just the way it is. Some things never change. That's just how it is. So, thank you very, very much for listening. I do appreciate it. Please follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a rating if you are listening to this on Spotify on your mobile phone. I've been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I will catch you all in a bit. Bye-bye.